Welcome back to The Explainer. So, I want you to imagine for a second the sheer, utter chaos that kicks off when a massive, centralized superpower just collapses. The dust settles, the central authority is totally gone, and suddenly everyone is scrambling for a piece of the pie. I mean, it kind of sounds like the setup for a dystopian movie, right? But this is exactly what went down in North India after the downfall of the mighty Gupta Empire.
Now, you might be wondering what actually happens when a superpower falls apart like that. A lot of people think the answer is an immediate plunge into some sort of dark age of ignorance and poverty. But the historical texts tell us a completely different story. The fall of the Guptas didn't plunge India into darkness at all. Instead, it created this massive power vacuum. North India splintered into all these smaller warrior kingdoms, each with its own fierce regional identity. And they were intensely competing for dominance.
The really crucial point here is that this chaotic splintering wasn't the end of an era. It was actually the incubation period for a brilliant new one. Over the next couple of centuries, right out of the ashes of the Gupta Empire, three distinct and incredibly powerful pillars of regional power emerged. First, in the 7th century, we see the rise of King Harsha. And then, jumping into the 8th century, we get the formidable Pala and Rashtrakuta empires. And these regional superpowers didn't just fight each other, they fueled an absolute golden age of culture, architecture, and learning. Okay, let's dive right into how this power vacuum was actually filled. We're going to cover the power vacuum itself, then look at Harsha, king of the north, move on to the Palas, patrons of the east, and wrap up with the Rashtrakutas, lords of the Deccan. Let's start with part 1, Harsha, king of the north, and the Pushyabhuti dynasty. Harsha's rise to power honestly reads like a thriller. After his brother was treacherously murdered by the ruler of Bengal, Harsha literally had to rescue his sister from throwing herself onto a burning pyre. And from that intense tragedy, an empire was born. His very first order of business? Revenge. Just look at Harsha's silver coin here, sitting right next to the coin of his bitter rival Sashanka, the guy who murdered his brother. Harsha wasn't messing around. He sent out aggressive ultimatums to neighboring kings, basically, surrender or prepare for battle. Through sheer military force and some really smart strategic alliances, he subjugated his rivals and expanded his absolute sway over a vast, compact territory stretching right between the Ganges and Yamuna rivers. Now, you don't hold together a warring continent without some highly organized administration. And this beautifully illustrates that. Harsha had a dedicated council of ministers with incredibly specialized roles. You've got Avanti handling foreign relations and war, Simhananda acting as commander-in-chief, Kuntala commanding the cavalry, and Skandagupta in charge of the all-important Elephant Force, which, let's be real, was basically the heavy tank division of the 7th century. It was a tightly run, highly disciplined military state that managed to keep the peace. But you might be asking, how do we actually know so much about the day-to-day reality of Harsha's empire? Well, we owe a massive debt to our sort of reporter on the ground. This is Xuanzang, a Chinese Buddhist monk. Known as the Prince of Pilgrims, he spent about 13 years in India just observing everything. Harsha deeply admired him, and his incredibly detailed accounts give us this vivid day-to-day window into what it was actually like to live in 7th century India.
And according to Xuanzang, life under Harsha was pretty fascinating and strictly regulated. He noted that perfect law and order prevailed across the empire. The catch? The criminal law was incredibly severe. We're talking trials by ordeal, and defiance of the law or offenses against social morality were literally punished by maiming. On the home front, people were mostly vegetarian. They rarely used onion or garlic. They also maintained these really high standards of purity and hygiene, which, interestingly enough, included smearing their floors with cow dung. He also pointed out that women of higher classes enjoyed a degree of freedom, noting that they didn't wear the purdah or restrictive veils. But despite those intense laws, Harsha was also famously charitable and highly tolerant. So while he kept a tight grip on social order, he had a deep respect for all faiths. He frequently convened these grand assemblies, the most famous being the quinquennial assemblies, meaning they happened every 5 years. These were known as the Mahamoksha Parishad, held at Prague right at the confluence of the Ganges and Yamuna rivers. Get this. Over 4 days, Harsha would literally empty out his royal treasury, distributing his massive wealth to Buddhist monks, Vedic scholars, and the poor alike. He treated all creeds with equal respect.
Moving on to part 2, the Palas, patrons of the east. As we shift our focus from the center of the Gangetic Plain over to the east, we run into a story that sounds like it's straight out of a myth. Back in the mid-8th century, the region of Bengal was just suffering from endless petty wars between local chieftains. There was zero central authority. So, in 750 CE, a group of these chiefs did something pretty remarkable. They held an election. They chose a Kshatriya chief named Gopala to be their king. But here is the really wild part. Legend has it Gopala was elected specifically because of his ability to kill a demoness that had supposedly murdered all the previously elected leaders. I mean, whether that was literal or a metaphor for the chaos of the time, Gopala slayed it. His authority was quickly recognized, and just like that, the Pala dynasty was born. Under Gopala's successors, Dharmapala and Devapala, the Pala kingdom became an absolute force to be reckoned with. They weren't just warriors, though. They were incredibly wealthy. They were pulling in massive income from deep commercial contacts over in Southeast Asia. And they spent that wealth on monumental architecture. Just take a look at this. The majestic Somapura Mahavihara in modern-day Bangladesh. The sheer massive footprint of this place is a total testament to the incredible scale of Pala resources and their intense dedication to their faith. You see, the Palas were some of history's greatest patrons of Mahayana Buddhism. They used all that immense wealth to fuel a true intellectual golden age. They founded and funded massive university towns that brought in scholars from all over the world. Dhammapala founded the Kramashila University, which you're seeing the incredible ruins of here, and they also fiercely supported the world-famous Nalanda University. We have to remember, these weren't just local schools, they were international hubs for philosophy, medicine, and Sanskrit translation. They practically connected Eastern India to places like Tibet, Java, and Sumatra.
Okay, let's head south for part 3, the Rashtrakutas, Lords of the Deccan.
So, if the Palas were the wealthy intellectuals, the Rashtrakutas were the fiercely unstoppable military masters of the Deccan Plateau. They actually started out merely as feudataries, vassals to other kings, but they definitely didn't stay subservient for long. They built an absolute war machine. Their founder, Dantidurga, boldly captured Malwa and Gujarat in the 8th century. After him, rulers like Dhruva and Govinda III just relentlessly humbled rival kings, turning the Rashtrakutas into the undisputed overlords of the Deccan. They were for sure the fiercest contenders in this massive triangular contest for northern supremacy. Later on, their last great ruler, Krishna III, even marched his armies all the way down to Rameshwaram, at the very tip of India, literally just to build a pillar of victory. Their military reach was simply staggering.
But they weren't just conquerors. The Rashtrakutas funneled all those massive military spoils into some of the most spectacular art the world has ever seen. Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer, breathtaking scale of the monolithic Kailasanath temple at Ellora, which was built during the time of Krishna I.
I actually want to completely slow down here for a second so you can fully grasp what you're looking at. This entire, massive, intricate, multi-story temple, it was not built by stacking stones. The historical record proudly declares it was hewn out of a single rock. Think about that. In the 8th century, Rashtrakuta artisans carved an entire mountain, top down, just to reveal this temple hiding inside the stone. It is literally a mind-blowing feat of engineering and devotion. And when you walk inside the Ellora Cave complex, you are greeted by these masterful sculpture panels that really test the limits of human craftsmanship. The Rashtrakutas patronized incredible depictions of Hindu mythology. You can see the famous panel of the demon king Ravana shaking Mount Kailasa, or the stunningly intricate forms of dancing Shiva. It's a profound testament to their unparalleled patronage of the arts, showcasing a level of detail that is still breathtaking today.
And as if Ellora wasn't enough, the Rashtrakutas also contributed heavily to the rock-cut shrines at Elephanta in Maharashtra. In fact, the main shrine here is considered by some texts to be artistically superior even to Ellora. It houses the magnificent Maheshamurti, that's a staggering 25-foot-tall, three-faced bust of Lord Shiva, and it's widely considered to be one of the absolute finest pieces of sculpture in all of India.
Finally, let's look at part 4, a golden age of regional rivalry.
So, to wrap this all up, the fall of the massive Gupta Empire didn't bring darkness. Instead, that power vacuum gave birth to 3 fiercely competitive regional superpowers: Harsh's brilliantly administered north, the Pala's wealthy and intellectual east, and the Rashtrakutas' unmatched Deccan powerhouse. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to ponder. We often assume that a massive, unified empire is the absolute pinnacle of civilization. But looking at this spectacular art, the massive universities, and the distinct cultures produced during this era, is a unified empire always better?
Or is it actually fierce regional rivalry and competition that drives our greatest cultural leaps? Think about it. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, and I really hope this completely changes how you view the chaos of history.